Who let you on this road, old man?
Watch out there, old-timer. One of these teenagers deliberately bumped into Walter Adams, who's 90 years old, making him stumble off the sidewalk and fall into the busy street. Horns blared loudly. Walter, a decorated veteran from 3 wars, managed to steady himself just in time, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from a sudden surge of anger. The teenagers just laughed, clapped mockingly, and sauntered away. 20 minutes later, as they were still celebrating among themselves in a nearby alley, the entrance to the alley was suddenly blocked by 2 imposing figures in Marine Corps blue uniforms, followed by the sharp, disciplined sound of marching boots. If you believe that respect for the elderly, especially veterans, is an unbreakable honor, just wait and see what happens next. Walter Adams has lived 90 years, and most of that time, he's dedicated to serving others. He enlisted as a young boy lying about his age to join World War II, then served through the Korean War and a tour in Vietnam before retiring as a Marine Corps artillery sergeant. His small apartment is filled with carefully preserved mementos, faded photos, commendations, a box of medals he never wears, but treasures as reminders of the men he fought alongside and the sacrifices they made. His body is frail now, his steps slow and aided by a simple wooden cane, but his eyes still shine with the steady gaze of a man who's faced death and never blinked. He lives a quiet, mostly secluded life, taking daily walks to the local park and library. He doesn't ask for much, just a bit of peace and a little respect. He was out on his usual afternoon stroll, heading to the bakery for his weekly treat, an eclair, when he encountered a group of teenagers. They were a familiar sight in the neighborhood, a group of 4 or 5 young men who often hung around their boredom, spilling over into petty vandalism or intimidating passers-by. Walter usually gave them a wide berth, not out of fear, but to avoid unnecessary trouble. The bakery, they were sprawled out on the benches, stretching their legs, forcing pedestrians to step into the gutter. Walter. But today, they blocked the narrow path outside the bakery, sprawled out on the benches, with their legs stretched out, forcing pedestrians to step into the gutter. Walter approached, intending to politely ask them to move aside. "Excuse me, fellas," he began, his voice a bit raspy with age. "Could I trouble you to let an old soldier through?" The group's leader, a tall young man with a smug expression and a backward baseball cap, looked Walter up and down with disdain. "Old soldier, huh? How old are you? Like 100? His buddies chuckled. Walter said, just wanting to get to the bakery, not paying attention to the sailboat, his hand on his cane. "If you don't mind," the leader replied mockingly. "Yeah, I think we do mind. This is our bench, Gramps. Find another way round." He deliberately stretched his legs out further, blocking the path completely. Another teenager chimed in. "Yeah, maybe you should go home and take a nap before you fall." Walter felt that familiar surge of anger, something he hadn't felt in years, but he kept his voice calm. "No need to be rude, son. I just want to ask politely." "Politeness." The leader scoffed. He stood up, towering over Walter, clearly trying to intimidate him. "You want politeness? Maybe you should show some respect to your betters." Then he did something completely unexpected and cruel. As Walter tried to step around him, the teenager deliberately stuck out his foot, tripping him and shoving his shoulder hard. "Watch out there, old man," he growled as Walter lost his balance, stumbled off the high curb, his cane flying from his hand, and he fell heavily, but luckily landed upright in the path of oncoming traffic. Car horns blared fiercely. A car swerved hard to avoid him. Walter, his heart racing, scrambled back to the curb, his old reflexes kicking in sharply. The teenagers just burst out laughing, pointing and finding the near-tragic scene hilarious. "Look at him jump," one yelled. Maybe he learned that in the war. They high-fived each other. Then, seeing angry glares from other witnesses, they casually headed into a nearby alley, still chuckling, leaving Walter shaken and humiliated on the edge of the busy street. A kind woman rushed over to help Walter retrieve his cane and make sure he was okay. "Those awful kids," she exclaimed. "Are you hurt?" Dear Walter, though his hip ached from the fall and his pride was deeply wounded, managed a shaky smile. "I'm just startled, ma'am. Thank you for your kindness." He brushed off his hands, a slight tremble in them, the senseless cruelty and utter disrespect cutting deeper than any physical pain. He had faced enemy soldiers who showed more honor than those boys. He picked up his cane, the teenagers' laughter still echoing in his ears. He decided against getting the eclair. He didn't feel like it anymore. He just wanted to go home. But as he turned to leave, something held him back. Not just the pain in his hip, but a deeper, more seasoned instinct. He was a Marine. Marines don't just walk away from an unprovoked attack even at 90. He wouldn't confront them alone. His fighting days were long over. But there were other ways. He knew the neighborhood. He knew the alley they disappeared into led to a dead end, a small enclosed yard behind an abandoned warehouse, their favorite hangout spot. And he remembered something else. The local Marine Corps recruiting station was just 2 blocks away. The artillery sergeant in charge, a tough young Marine named Gunny Jackson, had a special soft spot for old veterans from his beloved Corps, especially from World War II and Korea. Frank had met him once at a VFW event. He fumbled for his simple old cell phone. He didn't have Gunny Jackson's direct number, but he had the main recruiting station hotline. He dialed his fingers, surprisingly steady, a cold determination settling in. "Sergeant Collins of the Marine Corps speaking. How can I help you?" "Sergeant Collins," Walter said, his voice soft but clear. "This is retired Artillery Sergeant Walter Adams. I need to speak with Gunny Jackson. This is an urgent matter regarding disrespectful behavior toward the uniform and an assault on an elderly Marine. The alley behind the old packing plant corner of 3rd Elman Street." There was a brief pause. Then Sergeant Collins's voice sharpened, becoming more alert. "Gunny, sir, please hold connecting you to Gunny Jackson." The phone rang, and Gunny Jackson's gruff, straightforward voice came on the line. "Gunny Jackson here. Who's this, Gunny?" "This is Walter Adams, retired artillery sergeant. How can I help you?" Gunny Green, the respect in Miller's voice, was immediate and absolute. Walter quickly recounted the facts, straightforwardly: the blocked sidewalk, the insults, the deliberate shove into traffic, the teenagers now holed up in the dead-end alley. He didn't embellish or demand revenge, just stated the truth. They disrespected the core values, Gunny Walter quietly finished, and they put one of our own in danger just for a cheap laugh. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Gunny Jackson spoke, his voice as cold as ice. "Gunny, are you injured?" "Shaken up a few bruises, but still in one piece." "I see Gunny. 3rd Elman, you said the alley behind the packing plant. How many are there?" 4 or 5, I assume they're young mid-teens." "Consider it handled, Gunny, Sir Gunny Jackson," said his voice now tense with controlled fury that Walter recognized. "Stay clear of that alley. We'll advise them Marine Corps style." The line went dead. Walter knew what Marine Corps-style advice might entail, especially with Gunny fired up and his eager young recruits on board. He found a bench with a safe view of the alley entrance, sat down, and waited. He didn't have to wait long. In less than 10 minutes, the quiet street was suddenly alive with the sight of Marines. Not in full combat gear, but some in crisp Charlie uniforms, others in utility, if they were on duty. Gunny Jackson, looking like a coiled spring, led a group of about 8 Marines, including recruiters and young boots waiting for boot camp, who clearly admired him. They moved with disciplined speed and purpose, that core Marine efficiency standing out. Not running, but covering ground with a fearsome efficiency. They made no noise. The Marines reached the narrow alley entrance. The narrow alley. Gunny Jackson raised his hand, and they spread out, 2 taking positions to block any escape from Gunny Jackson. Raised his hand, and they spread out, 2 taking positions to block any escape from the alley entrances, their faces stern, their postures radiating an unshakable authority that no mall cop or local police could hope to match. The remaining 6, led by Gunny Jackson, turned and disappeared into the dark alley. Walter, watching from his bench, couldn't see what was happening inside, but he could hear, or rather he could sense, the sudden shift from the teenagers' loud laughter. A stunned silence enveloped everything. Then, after a moment, he heard Gunny Jackson's voice, not yelling, but delivering each word with a cold, steely authority. He couldn't make out every word, but the tone was unmistakable. The tone of a drill instructor chewing out an especially clueless recruit. A tone promising swift, clear, and deeply unpleasant consequences for disrespect and foolishness. No sounds of physical violence, just a relentless verbal assault. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably just 5 or 6 minutes, Gunny Jackson's voice stopped. Then another Marine's voice started, just as firm perhaps, explaining some finer points about respect for the elderly, for veterans, for the community. More silence. Then the group of teenagers stumbled out of the alley one by one. They looked nothing like the cocky young men who had gone in. Their faces were pale. Some looked like they might cry. Their earlier bravado was completely gone, replaced by a deep, shocked horror. They didn't run. They walked almost tiptoeing out of the alley, avoiding eye contact with anyone, and hurried down the street as fast as their shaky legs could carry them, glancing over their shoulders as if expecting divine wrath. Gunny Jackson and his Marines emerged from the alley, their expression still stern, but with a subtle, dark satisfaction. Gunny Jackson spotted Walter on the bench, strode over, and saluted perfectly. "Artillery Sergeant Green, sir. The situation is resolved. Those young men have been thoroughly oriented on the core values of honor, courage, and commitment, with special emphasis on respecting the elderly and those who served." Walter slowly rose, returning the salute with a steadiness that surprised him. "Thank you, Gunny, and thank you to your Marines on my behalf." "No thanks needed," Gunny Jackson replied, his eyes steady. "We always take care of our own, and we don't tolerate disrespect to our ideals or the men who built that legacy." He paused. "Are you sure you're okay, sir? Need anything? Medical attention?" "I'm fine," Gunny Walter said, a small, genuine smile finally touching his lips. "You and your men have given me the best medicine." Gunny Jackson nodded, then turned to his Marines. "All right, Leathernecks, move out. Back to the station and carry on." The Marines fell in, executed a smart-about face, and marched off with the same impeccable discipline they brought, leaving the street quiet once more, but fundamentally changed. Walter watched them go, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the weather. He felt seen, respected, not as a burden or an invisible old man, but as a Marine. He even felt like getting that eclair after all. Now, the story of the Marine's intervention in the alley has become neighborhood legend, whispered with a mix of awe and delight. The advised teenagers are said to have become models of politeness for weeks afterward, tipping their hats to anyone over 60 and suddenly developing a deep respect for military insignia. Walter Adams continues his quiet walks, but now when he passes the Marine Corps recruiting station, there's always a crisp salute from whoever's on duty and a knowing nod. Because the Marine spirit doesn't fade with age or wear down with hardship. It endures. And when one of their own is slighted, the response, even if it's just a few good Marines advising some wayward kids in an alley, is swift, decisive, and unforgettable. Some lines you just don't cross. Semper Fidelis. Subscribe to my channel if you believe the bond among those who've served is unbreakable and respecting our veterans is a sacred duty.